Good morning. My name is Krzysztof Ostaszewski, and if you do not speak Polish, you can just call me Chris. My last name is pronounced Ostaszewski. And again, because it's a Polish name, it may be difficult, but I don't think it's that difficult. And I'm very serious that you can just call me Chris. My first name is the Polish version of Christopher, so it's not really unusual. The unusual thing about my first name is that there is no R in it. There is an RZ, but it stands for the same sound as CH in Chicago. So my first name is pronounced Krzysztof. And I will be telling you about insurance markets. I want to note a couple of things. First is that this is being recorded only temporarily. You will have access to the recording temporarily, and you need to tell me that you want access. The reason why I'm recording this is because I've had information from some of you that you may not be able to participate in every class. You may miss something. So I want to make the recording available to those of you who missed the class to be able to watch it. And that's the only purpose. There is no other purpose. So it's to make it available. Therefore, the recording will be kept in a Zoom cloud temporarily, only for the duration of the class. And let me know when you want to view the recording. I will send you the link to view it. Also, I want to remind you that I have a different email that I asked you to use, because it turns out the email I just sent to all of you in chat. And the reason why I'm asking you is because I had everything set up with the email at EM Lyon. And yesterday it turned out that everything was changed in it. And just recently, not sometime before, I had it set up so that the emails sent to my email at EM Lyon were forwarded to me, but I don't know what's happening right now. And I used to have an account in which I was able to view things online for the email, but I got the message that server is not used anymore by EM Lyon. So with apologies, please note the email I just sent you in the chat, and please use that email. I will be telling you about insurance markets, and the syllabus of the class can be found at an address on the internet that I'm going to type for you also in chat right now, which is not that hard to remember. And that's smarturl. Oh, I mistyped, so now it's hard. So I will correct it now. It's smarturl.it/insurance markets. Now it should be correct. I'm going to click on it to check it, and yes, everything works. So the second email, second URL, the address on the internet I sent you is correct. The first one was missing T after I. So if you click on this, you'll see the syllabus, and syllabus has links to all the lecture notes. And so all of the material are there, including tests from this class from previous years, something, I think 12 or maybe more, around 12 old tests. It's a very good idea for you to study old tests because the new tests the new test that you will get next week will be very much like the old test. Nothing different, nothing unusual. It will be very much like that. I also want to tell you that you can email me any questions anytime you have. I welcome that. I also want you to know that in some notes. In some places you may see references to the fact that I put practice problems about insurance mathematics mostly online in YouTube and in Rumble, videos of practice problem solutions. So if you want to find my channels on YouTube and Rumble, actually they're not that hard to find. The addresses are smarturl.it/pass actuarial exams. Actually, the current one is pass actuary exams. And the old one is smarturl.it/pass actuarial exams. And you may notice that I use this redirect service, smarturl.it. That's a website where you can create links, redirect links to various things on the internet. So if you can, if you want, for example, to find out information about me, you go to smarturl.it/Jedi. And if you click on that, I just sent you, you will see my main website with information for my students at my university, general information for students, and information about me and the department where I work, and so on. So all of those things are available, and I welcome you to use them. As I said, I will be telling you about insurance markets. I have given you various links in the syllabus to study notes. I will be showing you those study notes. But before I show you the study notes, I want to show you something that comes from a publication called Best's Review from the United States. And that will be the world's largest insurers based on their total assets in their insurance operations, not in their banking operations. So let me try to share the screen. Here it is. Something to think about, that this gives you also the size of the industry. What are the largest insurance companies in the world? The competition for the largest insurers in the world for the recent, at least a decade, has been typically between the two companies that you see at the very top in the ranking I'm showing for the end of 2018. And that's AXA, the largest French insurance company. And then number two at that time was Allianz, the largest German insurance company. The largest in terms of assets American insurance company, Prudential, is in the third place. Now, for a long time, before 2008, the largest insurance company in the world was American International Group. That's the company that was the only insurance company that had really, really big problems in the financial crisis in 2008. And it was substantially restructured, sold off a lot of its operations. And as a result, while it's still a large insurance company, it is not among the biggest in the world. So it's very interesting to see who is there. So, for example, number 4, Nippon Life Insurance Company from Japan. Typically, life insurance companies are larger in terms of assets than property casualty insurance companies are. As in Europe, you call them general insurance companies, and general insurance companies or property casualty insurance companies are those that insure things like cars, homes, buildings of any type, commercial activity, business insurance of various types. Then you see Berkshire Hathaway. That's a company of Warren Buffett, and it owns a large car insurance company called Geico, which is among the biggest in the United States. Then you see MetLife. That's also a large insurance company in the United States. Despite its name, it still has property casualty insurance operations. So, for example, it offers car insurance and home insurance. In fact, my car insurance and home insurance is with MetLife. Then you have Japan Post Insurance Company. That's a company associated with the post office in Japan. Prudential, the original Prudential from the United Kingdom, Legal and General from the United Kingdom, and number 10 in this classification is Ping An, Chinese insurance company. You see that it has the largest growth of these companies in the year from 2017 to 2018. And by the way, right behind it is Generali, a company that historically has been associated with operations in Italy and Austria, but headquarters are in Italy, and it's a very large company as well. And you have some other companies there that you may be familiar with. The one important thing that is worth remembering is that this is a large industry. I love insurance. Insurance is my favorite. It's a great industry. It does very interesting things, and there is a lot of work to be done in it. So if you're interested in jobs in the insurance industry, I encourage you to consider this. There are very interesting careers in the insurance industry. I teach students at my university who become future actuaries. Actuaries are the people who do the mathematical modeling for insurance companies in order to calculate how much insurance should cost and how much insurance companies should keep in reserves. Notice that in number 20, you have Life Insurance Corporation of India. And despite India being still relatively poor country, it has had very fast economic growth since its free market reforms started in 1991, and it's rapidly becoming one of the largest economies in the world. So this is something to think about, that there are these very large and important companies, and you may have work in them. Then I give you the list of the largest insurance companies in terms of premiums that they collect, and it looks rather dramatically different, because the largest insurance company in terms of premiums collected is now United Health Group, incorporated in the United States. And it's partly because health insurance, if it's a private business, it's very unusual. You don't accumulate as much assets. You spend the premiums very quickly on paying the claims. But AXA is still number 2, and it's very, very large. Then you have Ping An, China Life Insurance, Kaiser Foundation Group of Health Plans. That's also an insurance company, a health insurance company from the United States, like United Health. And Anthem is also a health insurance company, as you see. And Allianz is now in number 7, Generali number 8. And number 9 is State Farm Group. The reason why I'm interested in this is that this is the largest property casualty or general insurance company in the United States. And I work at the university, which is located about 3 kilometers from the headquarters of State Farm Insurance. State Farm Insurance is headquartered in Bloomington, Illinois, in a relatively small town in the middle of the state of Illinois, otherwise surrounded by cornfields, because there's really nothing else here in our town. I live in Bloomington, Illinois, where the headquarters of State Farm are. So it's a very, very large company headquartered in a very, very small town. And then the last one in the top 10 is People's Insurance Company Group of China. I noticed that Berkshire Hathaway does not make it to top 10. However, Berkshire Hathaway, if you count all of its operations, then it's one of the three largest financial companies in the world. And in fact, to my best knowledge, I don't have the data in front of me, but as I recall, the largest 3 financial companies in the world, that if you combine insurance, investment, and banking operations, then it would be Berkshire Hathaway, AXA, and Allianz in Germany. They are among, I believe they are the top 3 financial companies. If not, then they are among the largest in the world. So again, the point I'm trying to stress is that these are important, big companies with a lot of very good jobs and something for you to think about. And of course, if you're thinking about France, it is very interesting to notice that one of the largest insurance companies is a French company, AXA. Yes, you raised hands, so please, I believe you can turn on your microphone and tell me.
One question. What does the number in the last column mean?
I didn't quite understand the meaning of.
What does the number in the last column means? Percentage of change.
Change versus last year. So if it's a positive number, for example, now in banking, total non-banking assets increase in AXA from last year. I'll repeat. I'll show you
okay. Okay.
I'll share the screen again, and you'll see. So it's percentage change in the total non-banking. That means insurance, strictly insurance operations. So from 2017 to 2018, AXA grew by 6.71%. As you can see, some of the companies actually declined in their assets. For example, MetLife. MetLife is actually thinking about selling their property casualty insurance operations. And Ping An, as you can see, had the highest growth. So that was the story. Thank you very much for the question. Now I'm going to open my first set of notes. That's also the first set of notes linked in the syllabus that you can just click on the link in the syllabus and open the notes. I'm going to open them in Word in case I notice any mistakes. Then I'll be able to correct them, and I'll show them to you in just a moment. So I need to make sure that I share this with you. So. Okay, so this is again my name that you can see here, and you can email me at the email I sent you, or you can also email me by sending an email to actuary@ilstu.edu. And as I said, this is my title, and I'm actually now a distinguished professor, but that's not really that much of a deal. You can call me Chris for Christopher, with a K because my real name has a K, and my last name is pronounced like this, Ostaszewski. If you speak English, the tendency is to pronounce the middle like the Greek god Zeus, but there is no Zeus in my name. It's Chef, in Polish, of course. So these are study notes for you, not something for general consumption, not meant to be given to anybody in the world. Please remember this. This is for your benefit to the greatest degree possible that I can make it a benefit. So we are talking about insurance industry, insurance markets, insurance as an industry that interests us. And insurance is in general defined as an equitable transfer of the risk of a loss from one party to another in exchange for a premium. In American and traditional contract language, American English and contract language, another name for a premium is consideration, because consideration is the name for what you do to indicate agreement to a contract in traditional common law. So when you pay a premium, that's how you express your agreement to enter into an insurance contract. The other side, the insurance company, is supposed to be responsible for payment for something when that bad something, some loss happens to you. Some form of insurance has been in existence for almost as long as mankind exists, and exist throughout the world. However, insurance is what economists would call a superior good or superior service, that is something that you purchase more at an increasing rate when your income increases. It's not necessarily this way that when you're very wealthy, you purchase a lot of insurance, but when you're becoming wealthy, when you go from being poor to being middle class and then wealthier, you tend to purchase insurance because very poor people usually can't afford to buy insurance. And very wealthy people don't need it that much because they have their money, unless you provide some form of insurance for a very, very large loss in their situation, which, by the way, exists because in the United States, for example, we have insurance that provides payments of taxes due to the tax authority at the death of a person. Now, that death tax is a very controversial political concept because people always fight about it, but it does exist, and insurance companies provide products that pay the taxes. And it's a form of life insurance. So because people buy more of insurance as they are becoming wealthier, and because especially people who are in middle class are the main consumers of insurance, the share of the world's insurance markets in existence in wealthy nations is higher than the proportion of population they contain, or the share of the world's income, or the share of wealth. The largest insurance market overall is Europe. Now, the latest data I have is from 2006, but it's still, I'm sorry, this is in Europe. This is only in Europe. But European Union is still, even without the United Kingdom, is the largest insurance market in the world. The European Union is the largest insurance market in the world. And in Europe, the largest market in 2006 was the United Kingdom. At that time, 11% of the world. And then the second largest was France, and the third largest was Germany. Now, you may wonder, how come United Kingdom is the larger insurance market than Germany, and how come France is the larger insurance market than Germany? And the answer is very simple, because United Kingdom and France are countries that are wealthier than Germany, right? You know that. Now you can tell me what you think. Do you know that United Kingdom and France are wealthier than Germany? No comment? Okay, I will tell you. So in terms of income per capita, or gross domestic product per capita, in terms of economic output, Germany is ahead of France or United Kingdom. But in terms of wealth per capita, how much wealth you have, how much money you have, money in terms of money and property, then both United Kingdom and France are wealthier than Germany. Now, the largest markets in the world are United States, and then Japan, but European Union is larger than the United States as a market for insurance. Europe or European Union overtook North America in the size of the market at the end of 2004. And of course, 2004 was the year when European Union expanded a lot towards the east, because countries that used to be part of the Soviet bloc, a large number of them joined the European Union. Top 4 countries in the world in terms of insurance at that time accounted for 2/3 of the world's insurance premiums in 2006, but by 2010, their share declined to only half instead of 2/3. And that's because the economies of China and India are growing faster than the economies of Europe or North America. This is again the end of 2006 in terms of percentage of the gross domestic product that is used to pay insurance premiums. Number 1 in the world is United Kingdom, or at that time was. United Kingdom has the longest tradition of commercial insurance. So how old is commercial insurance and not insurance as a method of helping each other, having some kind of mutual arrangements to help each other, which is a form of insurance, and it exists still in the form of mutual insurance companies, because insurance companies can be owned by stockholders, like most businesses are owned right now, or insurance companies can be owned by their own policyholders. And if insurance companies are owned by their own policyholders, they are called mutual insurance companies. And for example, the State Farm Insurance Company, which is located almost next to where I live, is a mutual insurance company. That means that the profits of the company belong to policyholders. So for example, these companies regularly pay dividends from the profits to their policyholders. But in terms of commercial insurance, the United Kingdom has the largest share of their gross domestic product paid in premiums. And the reason for that is because commercial insurance is something that was effectively created in the United Kingdom. Now, I don't say that insurance didn't exist anywhere else, but in terms of the type of insurance enterprises that we know now, that is something that emerged out of the United Kingdom. And a very interesting question is when did this happen? So there is one company that still exists, which is very unusual because it's not a regular corporation, but instead the losses that are paid by it are paid by people who are called names of that company, and the possible liability of those names is unlimited. So this very unusual company is called Lloyd's of London, and Lloyd's of London exists since roughly 1678, 79, something like that. The first commercial fire insurance company was created in London also after the Great Fire of London in 1666. And the first life insurance company, which was a commercial company, was created around the time when the first mortality table was created, which was around 1690, based on mortality data from the city, which is now in Poland, called Wrocław. At that time, that city was in the Austrian Empire, or Austria, whatever you choose to call it. So we are talking about the second half of the 17th century. Late 1600s is when the first commercial type, like the modern insurance companies, first commercial insurance was created. This is quite a long time, and there is no question that at that time the leadership was very much in the United Kingdom. But other countries created their own versions of insurance very soon, and famously among insurance people and actuaries in 1865, a Prussian actuary, August Zillmer, Zillmer in German, in American English we call him Zillmer, but wrote a book about how to reserve in life insurance so that they can compete successfully with the British. So anyway, you see that the largest share of insurance of the gross domestic product in terms of insurance premiums is the United Kingdom. Number two is South Africa, and a very big reason for that is because for a long time it was a British colony which modeled its financial system on the United Kingdom, and there are extensive insurance operations there. Number three is Taiwan, if treated separately from China. And if counted as a market separately. Of course, I know that's a political issue, but there's very, very large insurance penetration in Taiwan because they just have very high savings rate and a lot of middle class. So that's the reason. South Korea, Switzerland, Japan, France. And all of these things are the high penetration by insurance comes from two things: high savings rate and long tradition of insurance. So France has relatively long tradition of insurance as well. As I said, European Union is the largest insurance market in the world, followed by North America and Asia. But growth is in Asia, and European growth has been typically slower than North American growth. The US and Japan alone in 2010, US and Japan accounted for about 40% of world's insurance, and they are only about 7% of global population. Emerging economies accounted for 85% of the world's population, but only around 15% of premiums. Their markets are, however, growing at a quicker pace. So one very important thing to remember is what I was trying to tell you, that insurance is a superior good or a superior service that if you get wealthier, you purchase more of it. And so the important thing to remember is that a country that has fast economic growth will have even faster growth of insurance. So my students work in the insurance industry. My students mostly become actuaries. As I said, these actuaries do mathematical modeling for mostly calculation of the premium and calculation of reserves. And the demand for actuaries is growing the fastest in the fastest growing large economies in the world, which right now are India and China. So fast growth means even faster growth of demand for people who can do this work. Now, we are talking about insurance markets and private insurance. We will talk later about some insurance operations which are undertaken by governments and how they function. So for the private insurance to work, certain conditions are needed, because otherwise it becomes not feasible for insurance to do its job. The number one is large number of similar and independent exposure units. If you have a situation where the exposures are from very few but very large risks, then it becomes very difficult to insure them, because each one of them can bankrupt the insurance company. So the best situation is large number of similar independent exposure units. And if you're familiar with the central limit theorem, which you will become because I'll be telling you about it, then you know that if you have a sum of independent, identically distributed random variables, which could represent insurance losses, that sum in the limit approaches normal, its distribution approaches normal distribution, as long as the original distribution of the loss had the expected value and variance that it was possible to calculate the expected value and variance. But then it turns out that if you add up independent, identically distributed risks, then in the limit, they start behaving like normal distribution. And because we know the properties of normal distribution, normal probability distribution, we can calculate things more easily. Definite loss. It has to be possible to establish the amount of the loss and pay it and settle the claim. If it turns out that the loss is uncertain and it may there may be additional costs in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years, and it becomes impossible to finally settle the claim, then it becomes very difficult to provide private insurance for that. So, for example, occupational disease may involve prolonged exposure to injurious conditions where no specific time, place, or cause is identifiable. Because of that, in most countries in the world, there is significant involvement by government in providing compensation of some type for occupational diseases or accidents and so on, because sometimes it's just difficult to establish what the payment should be. The loss has to be accidental, not intentional. If the purpose of insurance is perceived to be as a way of getting money from the insurance company, then the insurance company will do all it can to avoid this kind of contract. So the event that constitutes the trigger of a claim should be fortuitous, or at least outside the control of the beneficiary of the insurance. The loss should be pure in the sense that it results from an event for which there is only the opportunity for cost. Events that contain speculative elements, such as ordinary business risks, are generally not considered insurable. Large loss. If there are a lot of very small losses, then it becomes difficult to process all this, because every time you process a loss, it's an expense. However, for private health insurance, you do have a situation where you process a lot of small losses and sometimes a large loss. And the answer to this is that health insurance functions this way partly because in most countries, government is very involved in providing health insurance instead of private companies, or in regulating private health insurance, and health insurance emerged with certain expectations. Also in the United States, where there's a very large insurance market, a private insurance market, even in that private insurance market, the processing of claims is done with coding for losses that was created by social insurance entity called Medicare. So the result is that health insurance is unusual, and partly because it emerged with a lot of guidance and involvement from governments. Affordable premium. So if the premium is so expensive that the customer cannot afford it, then it's unlikely that you will have any market. Calculable loss. There has to be a way to estimate, calculate the losses. You estimate before they happen and calculate when they happen. If losses are in some way so complex and so difficult to understand that you don't really know what's going to happen, then the likely scenarios that private insurance companies will avoid any involvement in providing such products. And remember, this is in the private sector, this is a voluntary product. For a lot of coverages, for some coverages, it's mandatory. You have to have car insurance, for example. You have to have various forms of business insurance for certain projects. However, the level of coverage that you choose, how you present the risk and so on, a lot of those things are still at the discretion of the insured. Limited risk of catastrophically large losses. If the losses that can happen are so big that they can bankrupt not even just one, but many insurance companies at the same time, then it's unlikely that there will be coverage for that provided. So in the United States, flood insurance is provided by the federal government of the United States. Because large parts of the United States are relatively flat with large rivers, which is very good for agriculture, but very bad for floods. And the risk is really bad because when there is a flood, all of the homes in the area are affected. It's a risk that affects a lot of people insured, and losses can become very easily catastrophically large. As a result, you have a situation where the government is very heavily involved. In commercial fire insurance, there is this substantial risk that you may have the spread of the fire, and the damage done can be very, very large. And the answer is, this is one of the main reasons why we have so much attention in a regulation of buildings to building to making sure that we build them in such a way that fires don't spread easily. And also we have arrangements for putting out the fires, controlling the risk, and so on. Also, if there are large insurance, large properties insured, then usually the coverage is spread among more than one insurance company. So I want to ask you this very basic and important question: why insurance exists? Why, or let me maybe phrase it simply as a sentence, why does insurance exist? Why do we have this activity? So the standard answer is to spread and manage risk. Now, of course, from the point of view of the consumers, it is that, well, the insurance company is supposed to pay me when I have a loss. But you need to understand that the money they pay comes from the premiums they collect. So it's really customers' money that is being returned. And the insurance company keeps some of it because they have to pay their expenses and they have to have a profit. Well, the question is related about the role of insurance companies. The question is related to the question, what is the function of all financial intermediaries, banks, insurance companies, investment companies, pension plans? So if you ask finance people, they would answer typically something in the style of American expression, to grease the wheels of commerce, to help the economy performance function. And I'm not against it, but I think that the role of all of these financial companies is very similar to the role of derivative securities dealers, people who issue derivative securities, who invest in securities issued by primary issuers, so stocks, bonds, loans, and create securities demanded by the consumers or by the markets in general. I probably should say, or by the markets in general. And this may sound maybe strange or different, but think about this. What does a bank do? It takes deposits and then it gives loans. Well, these loans are funded with the money from the deposits. To the person who deposited the money in the bank, that bank deposit is their investment, is their financial security that they purchase. And the bank has a short position in that security. And at the same time, it loans money to businesses. So basically purchases a security, an investment, which is that obligation to pay by the businesses. Well, when you have a position of being short and long certain securities, you basically a financial speculator that issues derivative securities. Of course, this is maybe not very heavy speculation. Nevertheless, it's basically the process is the same as the process of somebody who is an investment banker and issues rights, options, or other derivative securities. But it's only a part of the picture. A more general question is, what is the gain to the society from the existence of the insurance industry? Or is there a damaging effect on the society from the existence of the insurance industry? And you should ask yourself the same question about any financial company. Is there anything good that banks do for the society? Is there anything good that investment companies do for the society? If you ask the people who are involved in those industries, they generally think that they are providing a fantastic service to society. If you ask people who have been unhappy about their services, generally they have very negative perception and they would use very negative words to describe them. Well, I don't think that they're as bad as people who don't like them say they are, but they have done things that earn them some of the bad reputation. So as I said, it's important to note that payments from an insurance company to its client, a payment to its clients, then I should say, let's make it payment from an insurance company to its client, called claim payment in case of property casualty insurance, or benefit payment in case of life insurance, life annuity, or pension. That's a bad sentence now. Is called, okay. The fact that claims benefits are paid to those in need, those who suffered the loss, are compensated. Okay, that's again a bad sentence. That those who suffered the loss are compensated is not a net benefit to society because they already paid the money for it. All the funds paid to them are obtained from premiums collected from the insured customers. In fact, insurance payouts have to be less than amounts collected because premiums are equal to benefit and claims payouts plus expenses, salaries of employees, profits. And of course, profits are a form of expense because the cost of capital provided for the insurance company. So how does society benefit from this? So to view this, I want to ask you this question. Imagine a world in which there is no car insurance. Would people drive less or more? And the answer is they would drive less because they'd be scared of what happens if they have an accident. And that's a benefit to society. Insurance allows people to do more. In this case, people would drive more. People would drive less without insurance. So insurance causes them to drive more. And that's a benefit to society, that people can undertake more projects, do more things, because insurance allows people to do more by being able to assume more risk. But note also that this benefit can be detrimental to society. This detrimental effect is called the moral hazard. The moral hazard means that people who have insurance take more risks. Now, there are other expressions of this type of situation in life. For example, in the United States, we have a lot of diet products, and we have a lot of ice cream, for example, that has fewer calories than the diet. It's a diet ice cream. So what is the purpose of ice cream with half the calories? Well, at first you may think that the purpose is so that people don't get so fat. Well, the country that has the most diet foods in the world and the most diet ice cream of various types is the United States. And what is the fattest country? Where are the people most fat in the world? And the answer is the United States. So how can this be? And the answer is the purpose of ice cream with half the calories is to convince people to eat twice as much. So ironically, it may be that having a lot of diet foods causes people to eat more, just like insurance causes people to take more risk, and the results can be detrimental to the society. And again, that detrimental effect of taking more risk because you have insurance is called moral hazard. So the important issue is this: by encouraging people to take more risk, how do we make certain that they do not do this at the expense of others? And really, in many ways, that is the central part of the job of the actuary, the person who is in charge of creating mathematical models for running insurance companies. Whatever you do in any business, you always have to think about the consequences of what you do on the behavior of other people. What will be the result if you issue this product? Now, of course, you can have no consideration whatsoever for other people, but then probably you are in some type of short-term or destructive business, because most businesses need to think about their long-term future. And that's, at least to me, it seems that this is the natural behavior. So if you are an insurance company, you need to understand that if you offer people insurance that allows them to take more risk, then they will take more risk. So for example, one of the consequences of having home insurance that makes payments to people in case of hurricanes is that in the United States, the states that used to have very little population because hurricanes happened there, and it was risky to live there because if a hurricane came, you lost a house, now are much more populated. The state that receives the most people moving into that state right now in the United States is Florida. Florida used to be the state about 150 years ago where Americans would make jokes about moving to Florida because Florida is basically a swamp. In Florida, your home cannot have a basement because if you go deeper into the ground, you will have very high levels of water. You can't have a basement. And it's also a place that has hurricanes. So when there's a hurricane and the homes have no basement, they are extremely vulnerable in the hurricane. Most of the time, and if you're hit directly by a hurricane in Florida, your home will be completely demolished. Why do people live there? And the answer is they didn't used to live there. They live there now because we have reasonably good weather forecasts. So you are told when the hurricane is coming and you evacuate, and we have insurance. If you're so unlucky that your house is completely destroyed in a hurricane, the insurance company will pay to rebuild it. Now, that's not a very pleasant process, but people move there anyway, even though it's a distinct possibility. But when there was no insurance, 150 years ago, there was basically no commercial insurance for homes in Florida. People didn't move there. That's one very big change in the world. Other things are not changed that much. So how do we make sure that people don't take risks that impose too much burden on others? Can this happen? Yes, the history of insurance is full of stories like that. And also, as I just told you, these companies that market their products as diet products, where, of course, if you eat more of them, you're not on a diet. Those companies, to a degree, live at the expense of the customers who consume too much. Now, of course, people are responsible for what they eat, but we do have a problem of obesity in the United States, and we haven't solved it. In fact, public policy often is constructed to encourage extra risk-taking because we perceive it as a human need. So, for example, most countries worldwide provide health insurance and retirement insurance by the government or supported by the government to its citizens. This means, for example, that people who may take more risk with their health than they should, and people still able to work may retire nevertheless because public pensions eliminate the fear that their savings may not be enough to retire on. this insurance terminology, this means that the risk of longevity extension is absorbed by the government. In 1900, life expectancy in the United States was 46. 46, that was the average length of life in 1900 in the United States. Now it is about 79. In fact, for the entire 20th century, it was only going up, with this exception of the epidemic of the Spanish flu around 1920, and with the exception of world wars where it's difficult to do the calculation. But there is generally a very big improvement in longevity. The social insurance pension system in the US, Social Security, was created in 1935. And the cost of lifetime pensions can be very substantial. And the full cost is not really visible to people who participate in public schemes like Social Security. Now, if the retirement system were private, pensions paid too early would be expensive, and customers willing to work for some more years would switch to another company providing cheaper retirement benefits. This process of customers with less risk and lower cost of insurance as a result of lower risk switching to an insurer with lower prices is called adverse selection. It's adverse to the insurance company. It's very beneficial to the customers. But public provision of insurance is generally mandatory, and prices are set by law. This is called statutory pricing in American English. And this avoids adverse selection, but a trace of it always remains. For example, with public pensions, if those public pensions are not priced in line with market price of pensions, people work in the black market, underreport their income, invest privately, and try to hide those investments from the government and so on. Now, it's not very common in developed economies, although to some degree it happens. But in less developed economies, these were widespread practices for quite some time. Now, there's one more theorem that I want you to be aware of, not that it's central to the purpose of this class, but insurance is a form of finance. And in finance, at least my favorite theorem in finance is the Modigliani-Miller theorem, which effectively says that in the absence of taxes, bankruptcy costs, and asymmetric information, and in an efficient market, the value of a firm is unaffected by how that firm is financed. That is a tremendous statement if you think about it. And in particular, for a business firm, under the assumption of the theorem, it does not matter if the firm's capital is obtained by issuing stock or debt, or it does not matter what the firm's dividend policy is. The theorem is also called the capital structure irrelevance principle. An insured party has a choice of not buying insurance and paying the loss themselves, or paying for insurance and having all or some of the loss paid by the insurer. Which choice is better? Well, Modigliani-Miller theorem says if bankruptcy doesn't matter, if taxes do not matter, and there is no agency costs, costs of people acting, agency costs is the cost of an agent hired by a principal, and the person does the job for somebody who owns the property, and the agent may not act in the best interest of the person who owns the property. That's the main part of the problem with corporations, that the people who work in corporations may not have their incentives aligned with the incentives of the owners of the corporations. And in fact, the whole structure of ownership of modern corporations is very, very peculiar. That's something you might want to think about, because I think it's part of the problems we're experiencing in society. So who owns the large corporations in our modern economies? And the answer is, well, shareholders typically. And who elects the people who manage the large corporations? Well, the shareholders, right? You may think it's the shareholders, but the reality is that most of the shareholders have their investments in investment companies, things like mutual funds, and the manager of the investment company votes the shares held by that investment company for the individual investors. The individual investors do not directly vote the shares. So people who are in the financial industry vote on election of management of firms. They have much more influence than we assume, and that makes basically the economic power accumulates unduly to people who are in the financial industry to affect who manages the largest corporations in the economy. And I think that's a problem because the actual property rights belong to the shareholders. So I don't know how we can solve this. One possible solution is for people to not invest in mutual funds and instead buy securities directly. Now, of course, that is generally riskier because their portfolios are not immediately diversified. And that's why people invest in mutual funds and other investment vehicles, because they want a more organized approach with diversification immediately. And it's very rational, but it has consequences for the society. So for an individual person insured, assumptions of the Modigliani-Miller theorem are clearly violated. Individuals protect themselves against large losses that can bankrupt or nearly bankrupt them: loss of house, loss of employment income, loss of the person whose income supports the entire family, and so on. In other words, there is no such thing as bankruptcy does not matter for individual persons, typically. If you're a billionaire, maybe that's not a problem, but for most people, that's a very real issue. Taxes do matter, although mostly because of public policy making it so. Many forms of insurance premiums are tax deductible. That, of course, depends on the public policy in the country. Okay. Right. And in the US, some forms of benefits of insurance are not taxable at all. So, for example, life insurance benefits are not taxable. And disability insurance benefits are also not taxable if premium paid was not tax deductible. And health insurance premium is tax deductible, typically in the US. There's great asymmetry of information between the insured and the insurance firm, although not necessarily in one direction. On one hand, the insured has more information about own health, abilities, family situation, and so on. On the other hand, insurance contracts are complex and often not fully understood by the customers. And that is, of course, one of the reasons why the extensive system of insurance regulation of insurance regulation that exists worldwide. If the insured entity is a firm, assumptions of the theorem are also often violated. Insurance against losses large in relation to the insured firms can lower probability of bankruptcy. And that alone is actually one of the major reasons why any businesses buy insurance, because they want to avoid losses that will bankrupt them. And taxes do matter because progressive income tax causes average tax liability to be lower when taxes are less volatile, or income is actually less volatile, I should have said, when income is less volatile. That's a consequence of Jensen's inequality that you may have studied in your mathematics classes. In any business entity where owners are not the same as the managers, the potential for agency costs is very high. Complexity of insurance contracts and massive amounts of valuable private information in the firm make serious agency costs a certainty. And that's what we experience a lot in modern economy, that people who have certain power to control how corporations are run are not the people who provided the capital to create that corporation. The capital is provided by many, many small investors, and they have much less say about how the corporation is run than the people who are the elected managers. But again, it used to be that private business meant that the person who created the business is in charge of the business, owns the business, and so on. And that person assumed full responsibility, and her capital was on the line. But in modern corporations, the people who run the corporations are just professional managers who are elected, chosen for that position by the board of directors. They never provide the capital for the company. And very often they experience very, very large benefits from good performance of the company, more so than the shareholders, because they are very often paid in options. Now, of course, they're paid in options because of restrictions of tax deductibility of the income of the managers in certain situations. So it's a complex problem, but I just want you to note that this theorem basically tells us that finance doesn't matter unless it's because of taxes, bankruptcy costs, or relationships that people have, mostly the agency costs. And because in reality, agency costs are substantial, taxes do matter, bankruptcy matters, finance can create value, can be beneficial. But we need to keep in mind that if it wasn't for these circumstances, then financial arrangements is just shuffling of papers, shuffling of money. It doesn't create value by itself. It has to create value through the process of either protecting the insured from bankruptcy. That's a very real job. That's a very real benefit, that the risk of bankruptcy is absorbed through the insurance process, or lowering taxes of the insured people. Now, that's public policy. The government decides that certain things are taxable, certain things are not taxable. And the insurance company can make arrangements so that your assets or your income are moved into a place where they're not taxable. Is this very beneficial to the economy? Well, not so much. It's somewhat artificial, but it is the reality that we live in, and it's a way for insurance companies to make money. And of course, not only insurance companies are involved in various schemes to avoid taxes. In fact, there are other financial companies that are involved in this even more. And finally, can insurance companies make people behave better? And the answer is, to a degree, yes, because insurance companies make people pay premiums. And when people undertake very risky and dangerous behavior, they pay higher premiums. People don't like it. People really complain about the insurance companies. But, well, that's the way it should be. People who take more risks should pay more in insurance. Also, insurance companies can and should make suggestions about how you can lower your cost of insurance if you do certain things. So, for example, State Farm has a research department that studies the effects of hurricanes, especially in Florida, because it's a large market. And they actually give the customers guidelines about how their homes should be built, what kind of windows they should use, what kind of doors they should use, what kind of structure they should use, so that the probability of being destroyed by a hurricane is reduced. And if customers follow these guidelines, they give them some discounts on their premium. So that's a direct effect on behavior of customers from the insurance company. Another thing that insurance companies do now is they collect data about how you drive. You can have a device put in your car that tells your insurance companies how you drive. I had one for a while. I'm trying to remember. I think it was MetLife that made me do that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was Liberty Mutual that I had before MetLife. So I had a device in my car, my wife had a device in her car, and my son had a device in his car. My daughter was already out of the house, so she had her own insurance. And we got a report which said that my wife, of course, was the safest driver. And compared to her, I was a very aggressive driver. And it gave me some points about how I was an aggressive driver. But compared to my son, I was a very mild or mildly aggressive driver, because my son was even more aggressive driver. And actually, if you condition yourself to think that it's not most important to beat everybody on the road. If you become a defensive driver, you do lower your probability of having an accident and having any trouble. And I know that especially people who are very sure of themselves think that they are the best drivers in the world, but everybody has some weaker points, let's say. It's not a bad thing to be told in what ways your driving is dangerous and correct that. And if you correct that, you may have, you may experience lower cost of insurance. So it's actually beneficial, although it's embarrassing. So why then do individuals and firms buy insurance? In the real world, assumptions of Modigliani-Miller theorem are violated. But to explain insurance purchases more practical, so that's, by the way, one reason. Insurance may create value to the society. That's why we purchase insurance. How? By lowering bankruptcy costs, by lowering tax expenses. Of course, then the question is, is this a net benefit to the whole society? And by also lowering the costs of relationships with people by making you behave better. But to explain insurance purchases more practically, what is proposed in economic and insurance literature is that money is not valued at its nominal face value, but by its utility to an economic decision maker by the use of a utility function. So that's actually something that is very natural, may seem strange, but there is a saying that money doesn't buy happiness, because people who have $100 million are just as happy as people who have $101 million. Now, that saying is a joke, but there is wisdom in it. And the point is that if you have $100 million, that extra 1 million is valuable, but it's not immensely valuable because you already have $100 million. If you don't have any money and suddenly get $1 million, that $1 million is immensely valuable. So there is a very big difference in going from 0 to 1 million and going from 100 to 101 million. And utility function is an attempt to measure this, to quantify it. So utility function U of W of wealth W is a measure of how valuable that wealth is to an economic decision maker. And that can be you, or it can be a company purchasing insurance, or it could be the insurance company. But for each, we have some form of measurement of how valuable money is to you, money and property in general. Typically, we assume that this function has zero value at 0, that it's increasing, meaning that the more money you have, the more utility of that money you have. But it's increasing at a decreasing rate because your first $1 million is more valuable to you than your second million, and then that's third million is still less valuable. So we commonly assume that U is a continuous function, which is twice differentiable. It has the first derivative and the second derivative, and that the derivative of it is positive while its second derivative is negative. And that practically means that the graph of the function is concave. In general, when facing a random loss of X, the decision maker would be willing to pay a premium G for complete insurance if and only if the utility of wealth minus the cost of premium, so wealth minus G, is greater than or equal to the expected value of the random utility of wealth minus the loss, where the loss is a random variable. This reasoning assumes that expected utility is a proper measure of consumer satisfaction. Well, you may disagree with that, but it's a very reasonable model that we use for describing things. Note that the maximum premium the consumer is willing to pay is the one that satisfies the equation that utility of not having insurance, which, I'm sorry, take it back, utility of insurance situation, which is utility of wealth minus the cost of insurance, is the same as the expected value of living without insurance. And that utility is W minus X, where W is the wealth that you have at the beginning, and X is the random loss that the insurance would cover. So if you're indifferent between having insurance and not having insurance based on this expected utility criterion, that, by the way, is you are said to be risk neutral if that situation happens. Then, of course, that's the biggest premium insurance customer, the consumer is willing to pay. So suppose that we have a situation like this. It's a bit of a strange problem because the utility function here is negative. And utility of 0 is -1. So not a very good model, but it makes calculations possibly. And so let me actually make a comment about this. This is an unusual utility function, but let us use it in this problem for ease of calculation. Because this calculation gets more complicated when you have different forms of utility functions. Calculate the expected loss and the maximum insurance premium the property owner will pay for complete insurance. Complete insurance means insurance covering the entire loss. And we say this because there are insurance contracts where the customer has to pay a certain portion of the loss. That portion paid by the customer is typically called the deductible. And it's a standard feature in most contracts. It's based, the concept was kind of presented as a very good solution. The concept has been used by insurance companies, but it was presented as a very good solution to creating optimal insurance contracts in a paper by Kenneth Arrow, who was a Nobel Prize winner mostly for that paper. So in the case of this problem, the expected loss is given by, with probability 0.75, the loss is 0. With probability of 0.25, the loss is the expected value calculation of X, the loss, times the probability density function that is defined in the problem. So let's go back to the problem, and you see this here, right? So that's what we use in this calculation. And the point in this that you see here is that this integral from 0 to plus infinity of x times 1 over 100 or 0.01 e to the minus 0.01 x dx. This is the expected value of exponential distribution with hazard rate of 0.01. And therefore it must equal to 100. So this whole thing is equal to 25. And now the key question for you. So what do you know about probability distributions? and about the exponential distribution. Anybody cares to tell me? I'm going to open the my notes about exponential distribution, and I'm going to show this to you. So I'm going to switch to the other screen. Here is the information of what is called exponential distribution. A random variable x is said to have exponential distribution if its density function is of the form lambda times e to the minus lambda x for positive x, and the density is 0 otherwise. That parameter lambda is called the hazard rate of this distribution. The cumulative distribution function of it is equal to 1 minus e to the minus lambda x for positive x and 0 otherwise. And 1 minus the cumulative distribution function is commonly called the survival function. So the survival function of exponential distributions of the form e to the minus lambda x for positive x and 0, well, actually not 0. I'm going to correct this, sorry. 1. Okay, otherwise. Okay, I messed up a bit, but now it's corrected. That's because the survival function is 1 for x less than or equal to 0. The hazard rate of any random variable is defined as its probability density function if it's a continuous distribution, or probability function if it's discrete. So whatever lowercase f is divided by that survival function, which in this case is lambda. And it's undefined, well, actually, I can, again, I should just delete this. Not relevant. It's not relevant because we only consider this distribution of a positive x. So let's just leave it like this. I will send you these notes if you're interested. You can look it up in Wikipedia. This is something that is pretty standard, but I don't know what your background in mathematics is. And you can tell me. My job is to help you. Okay, so in any case, this is the exponential distribution. The expected value of exponential distribution random variable is 1 over that parameter lambda, and the variance is the square of the expected value. And the point I'm trying to make is that we will be using mathematics in these lectures. So please remember that we might be using things like this. In this case, this is the expected value. And so it's 100 times 0.25 equals 25. What this is saying is that the expected value of the loss is 25. Here is the calculation of how you prove that this integral is actually equal to 100. You do this by using integration by parts. Or you can use what I call the Darth Vader rule. A Darth Vader rule is the statement that the expected value of a random variable with only non-negative values is equal to the integral of its survival function. Okay. So have you ever heard of the Darth Vader rule? I'm sorry, I'm kind of used to the idea that students talk to me when they have questions or think about things. So have you heard about this Darth Vader rule? No. I guess not.
No.
Okay, I will show you something. I'm going to open a new window in my browser and show you something there. This is my website, and I'm going to write smarturl.it/Darth Vader rule. And here is my YouTube channel. Okay, I'm sorry that it has a commercial, but this is my exercise on probability that I posted in my YouTube channel on January 20th, 2017. And it has a statement of the Darth Vader rule. And I published a paper where we called it that. That's why the name. And the reason why I called it that is because I want you to remember it. So it needs a name that will make you remember it. So there it is. If x is a random variable such that the expected value of x exists, which is non-negative almost surely, so with probability 1, then the expected value of x is equal to the integral from 0 to infinity of the survival function of x dx. This is true for any random variable, not just continuous random variable, but any random variable whatsoever. And I want to show you a simple problem here in this YouTube channel, in this video. Is something like this. You are given the joint distribution of x and y is uniform on the unit circle, so a circle centered at the origin and the radius 1. Find the expected value of the distance of the random point xy from the point 0, 0. Okay, this is how you would calculate it the normal way, using the uniform density on the unit circle, which would have the probability density function of 1 over pi, because the area of a unit circle is pi. And you would have to use polar coordinates, and you would have to struggle with it a bit. But the force is very strong with this one, because if we write t for the distance of the point xy to the point 0, 0, then that distance is the probability that t, the random distance from 0, 0, is more than t. So survival function, I'm sorry, is equal to the probability that t is more than t by definition. But what is the probability that a random distance from 0, 0 is more than the specific value of t? That's a probability of being outside of a circle of radius t, but inside of the unit circle. And the area outside of the circle of radius t is pi minus pi t squared, because that pi is really pi times 1 squared. So the area of a unit circle minus the area of a circle of radius t divided by the area of a unit circle. That's equal to 1 minus t squared. And all we do now is to find the expected distance from 0, 0 is take the integral of that survival function, which is the integral from 0 to 1 of 1 minus t squared. That's 2/3. So that's my favorite example of using what I call the Darth Vader rule. And the reason why I'm telling you about this is that it really helps you better understand the concept of expected value and calculate it more efficiently. So that's an important thing to remember. And you can use it to calculate this expected value. So instead of doing this integration by parts, you can just do the integral from 0 to plus infinity of either minus 0.01 x dx, and that's equal to 100. In general, if t is an exponential random variable with density f sub t of t equal to lambda either minus lambda t, then the expected value of t is 1 over lambda. So in this problem, we apply the general equation u of w minus g is equal to the expected value of u of w minus x to determine the maximum premium that the owner will pay for the complete insurance. This is the concept that you really need to pay attention to and remember, because I've regularly asked this question on the test for this class. However, we are at the point where we should take a 15-minute break. And the one very important thing is that the classroom, virtual classroom changes sometimes, but no. Our next meeting is in the same classroom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right now pause my video and pause my voice. We will take a 15-minute break and I'll see you after 15 minutes. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you very much again for being here. So I will go back to that exercise, which I strongly encourage you to pay attention to and learn from it. And of course, I'll be very happy to explain things. So here's the crucial thing we do to determine the maximum premium that the owner of the property, in this case, the potential customer of an insurance company, will pay for the complete insurance. And again, complete insurance is insurance that pays the entire cost of the loss, covering the entire loss. Okay, so the equation is the utility of wealth minus the premium, which is the situation where you purchase insurance and you know that when the loss happens, insurance will pay everything. And the other side is the expected value of utility of wealth minus X, where X is the random amount of loss. So this is the situation where the customer is completely indifferent between buying insurance or not buying insurance. Now, if utility of the situation with insurance is greater than the expected utility of wealth minus the random loss, then the customer actually benefits from purchasing insurance. That's the situation which is ideal, that when the customer and the insurance company have a contract, the insurance company benefits because they have some kind of profit from this, and the customer benefits because the customer, in her opinion, is better off with insurance than without insurance. That's the ideal situation. This is the borderline case that we're setting up here. So the utility of the wealth minus G, based on this unusual utility function that we set up, is equal to minus e to the power minus W minus G over 400. And that's utility of W minus G, and is equal to the expected value utility of wealth minus X. Now, the probabilities here work this way, that with probability 0.75, the loss amount X is 0. So probability 0.75 times minus the e to the minus W over 400, that's the wealth of the customer is completely unaffected because there is no loss. It's still W as the wealth. And with probability 0.25, we have this loss described by the exponential random variable, and then the expected utility will be the integral from 0 to infinity for calculation of expected value of minus e to the minus W minus X over 400 times 0.01 times e to the minus 0.01x. This second expression here, that's the density of that exponential distribution we're working with. Now we have a minus on both sides. We can cancel it and write everything as follows, that it's e to the minus W over 400 times e to the G over 400 is equal to 0.75 times e to the minus W over 400. Plus 0.25 times e to the minus W over 400, which is inside of the integral here, but it doesn't depend on X, so we can put it in front. And inside we have the integral from 0 to plus infinity of e to the X over 400 times 0.01 times e to the minus 0.01x dx. Now we can cancel out the e to the minus W over 400, which is actually the only thing that relates to the wealth of the customer. It turns out that the wealth of a customer is irrelevant for the purpose of calculation of the premium. So we cancel it, and then we get e to the G over 400 is equal to 0.75 plus 0.25. And now I factor out 0.01, which is in here, divided by 0.0075. And inside, I end up with 0.0075 times e to the minus 0.0075 x dx, because x over 400 minus 0.001x will actually end up giving us this as the expression that we get, because if you multiply these two exponentials, then you would be adding the exponents. Once you add these exponents, you will get this number exactly, negative 0.0075. But if I put that that 0.0075 in front of the e to the minus 0.0075, this becomes the probability density function of exponential distribution with hazard rate 0.0075. And therefore, this is an integral of a density of random variable, and integral of any density is equal to 1, because probability of everything is 1. So this ends up being just 0.75 plus 0.25 times 0.01 over 0.0075. The first number, 0.75, is 3/4. The second number, if you multiply it out, turns out to be just 1/3. Because this 0.25 multiplied by 0.001 will end up being 0.0025 divided by 0.0075, that's just 1/3. So 3/4 plus 1/3, and that's equal to 13/12. And this is now an equation in which G, this thing that we're looking for, is in here, e to the G over 400 equals 13/12. It's an equation in which the unknown is in the exponent. And you should know from your algebra classes that when the unknown is in the exponent, we solve the equation by taking the natural logarithm of both sides. You can take some other type of logarithm, but that's fine too. But it's just the simplest is to take the natural logarithm, because that's a function in every calculator in Excel and everything. So this ends up being G over 400 being equal to natural logarithm of 13/12. And therefore G is equal to 400 times the natural logarithm of 13/12, which is approximately 32.0171. So what this is saying is that the maximum amount the customer is willing to pay for this insurance is approximately 32.0171. And if the premium for the insurance is anything less than this, then the customer will not just pay it, but pay it gladly, because the customer effectively benefits from this insurance by paying less than the maximum amount he is willing to pay. That's kind of a very common phenomenon in economics. Why do you enter into a transaction? Because the price you pay is less than the value of the thing you're buying to you. That's a decision you make. Is there any kind of limit to what you're willing to pay? And the answer is, of course, typically there is a limit to what you're willing to pay in any transaction. And in this case, the limit that the customer is willing to pay, the maximum, is 32.0171. And now the job of the insurance company is to find a way to offer this product to this customer at a price that is less than 32.0171, so that through this transaction, the customer benefits and the insurance company benefits if the insurance company can make a profit on this transaction. Now, admittedly, if the insurance company cannot make a profit by charging anything less than this, that's a problem. That's a market that will probably not clear, but well, we hope that the market will work in some way. The point being is that insurance markets are, to a degree, like all other markets. The two sides have to be willing to enter into the transaction. In one aspect, they are not, because the amount of the loss that the insurance company will cover is random, it's unknown. And so this creates a situation where the insurance company has to do a very careful job of estimating the insurance. So that was a very basic exercise, and I would again stress that you should understand it, because you're likely to be asked a question like this on your test. And we'll be doing other exercises, but one thing I would stress is that every single question you will get on your test in this class will be like something that we did in class. So I strongly encourage you to study the study notes I gave you, and well, make sure that you understand them. Somebody sent me a question in the chat, so I'm going to, well, let me see if I can read it directly. I shared the PDF version of, so the question was, will you share this Word document with you? And the answer is, I shared the PDF version of it with you. And I'm sorry, that's the best I can do. If you're saying, what about the corrections I made in the process? So yes, I'll create a PDF file of the corrected version. If you want that, email me and I will send it to you. Although once I create a corrected PDF, I'll put it in the place where you can pick up the files. So the answer is, if you want the updated PDF, I will share it with you. Just ask.
Sir, I have a question about a detail in the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I did not necessarily get how did we get from the integral to 1?
Because it's the integral of a function which is a density of a random variable.
Ah, okay, sure.
Okay, that's good. One of the things that I do a lot for my students have to pass professional actuarial exams. And in the process, they have to do calculations on the exam. And one of the things that helps pass the exam is to be able to know what the result of calculating an integral is, because you know some principle that tells you what it is. And you just saw one of them. The integral of a density is 1 because it's a probability distribution. Another principle I just showed you is that thing that I call the Darth Vader rule, and I called it that so that my students remember. It is a good thing to see how things work so that in many situations you don't have to do the calculation because you already know the answer. That's the kind of underlying idea. But you will have 15 questions on your test and 3 hours. So you will have, let me try to calculate this in my head, but you will have something like almost 3 times as much time as American students have on American actuarial exams. And I don't really give you immensely difficult problems on the test. So you will be able to do calculations on the test. The one thing I stress is that you can't count on the test being very easy, but don't think it's going to be extremely difficult. What I'm trying to say is that everything on your test in some way is in the study notes I gave you. We have done problems like that. Typically, in practice, a risk that can be quantified can be insured. Now, of course, if the risk is just too high for anyone to bear its cost, or there are difficulties in quantifying the risk, then that's a problem, but we're ignoring it for now. Specific risks that give rise to claims are known as perils. An insurance policy sets out in detail which perils are covered by the policy and which are not. These notes will give you a non-exhaustive list of different types of insurance, and the single policy may cover one risk or multiple risks. So auto insurance or car insurance would typically cover both property risk, covering the risk of theft or damage to the car, and liability risk, which is risk of claims for causing damage to somebody else, causing an accident or damage to somebody else. Almost all, by the way, actually, I will, because there was this question, I will stop share for a moment And in the chat, I sent you the URL for the syllabus of the class. So I'll send it again right now. So the latest thing I just sent you is smarturl.it/insurance markets. If you click on that, it opens a PDF file. I will show you that PDF file. I will share screen and show you that PDF file. Here it is. And the syllabus link is given there. And I give you some background readings if you want to. This is just information about insurance markets, insurance industry. For example, the Geneva Association report about the social and economic value of insurance. I will not ask questions about these things. This is just general information. And for example, discussion of the credit crisis from 2008, the fact that most developed economies have aging populations and we have to provide some form of retirement benefits from them. For them, that's another situation here. And insurance and resolution of light of the systemic risk debate. The systemic risk is the risk to the entire financial system. There's a debate of whether insurance can cause risks of destruction or collapse of the financial system. So I'm on the side that says no, it can't. Banks can, insurance companies can't, but people have different opinions. Your opinion can be different than mine. It has no effect on what's going to be in the final and so on. It's an interesting debate, and I welcome the debate. But again, this is not going to be on the test. And some references, books that I have studied or that study the similar issues. If you click on that, you'll see that. What we are looking on right now, and this is, oh, actually I have it posted. So this is what I'm showing you right now. So I want you to know that this is the same thing as my Word file, except maybe slight corrections that I made, but the main content is the same. So all this you have, okay? So now I'm going to go back to my Word file. And I'm going to talk a little bit about health insurance. So almost all, really all developed countries have government-supplied healthcare system or health insurance. And in some countries, that's the only system of healthcare or health insurance. And in some countries, it's part of it. This may be in the form of universal health insurance or national healthcare system. In addition to that, private health insurance may exist, covering cost of private medical treatment. So in the United Kingdom, for example, National Health Service is the publicly funded health system, and there are also private health insurance policies for private hospitals, but they're very, very rare in terms of how much they're used. In the United States, health insurance premium paid by employer for employees is tax deductible, but purchase of health insurance by an individual consumer is paid with taxable premiums. So almost all private health insurance is employment-based. Now, as a result of the 2010 health insurance reform, which commonly is called Obamacare because it was implemented under President Obama, it is now possible to get limited tax credit for private purchase of health insurance. So it's a little bit different than having insurance deductible. It is the government basically pays you money through giving you your taxes back, and even more than your taxes in some situations. And the reason why it was done this way, by the way, was because deduction, meaning that some of your money is not made not taxable, is a bigger benefit for people with high incomes. But it's not that much of a benefit for people with low incomes because they pay very little taxes. In the US, they close to half of a population pay no income taxes. So they don't benefit from a tax deduction. And instead, the government gives them tax credit, which means that if they file their taxes, then the government will give them money for purchasing private health insurance through a system of organized exchanges, which is also, it's private companies that sell there, but the system is organized by the government. So kind of a combination of government run system and private companies providing within the government system. Now, again, any market exists typically under some form of government supervision, so it's not completely unusual. Generally, private health insurance policies distinguish between the following: hospital care, physical care and medical tests, prescription drug coverage, dental care, vision care, disability insurance, and long-term care. And you can see immediately, this one of the problems with insurance is that there's so many things in it, so many definitions, complications. This thing is covered, this thing is not covered. This is a separate policy, this is a separate policy. So for example, through my work, I have health insurance, but it's separate company for a regular hospital and doctor, separate company for prescription drugs, separate company for dental care, separate company for eye care, separate company also for mental health issues. I no longer carry disability insurance or long-term care, partly because I'm getting older. This is not relevant. In the United States, the United States has a system of social insurance for healthcare for persons age 65 or older who have worked the required number of years, called Medicare, and also has several parts: Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, Part D, and there is also something called Part C for special type of private policies that replace that care. All of this is immensely complicated. The one good thing about it is that people who know all of those things are typically actuaries. That's how actuaries get jobs. Disability insurance provides financial support in the event the policyholder is unable to work because of disabling illness or injury. Total permanent disability insurance provides benefits when a person is permanently disabled, so no longer able to return to work ever, and can no longer work in any profession. That the word total means cannot work in any profession. The word permanent means that the person, I'm sorry, so let me start over. Total refers to any profession, permanent refers to never working again. Disability overhead insurance allows business owners to cover the overhead expenses, also known as fixed expenses, expenses that must be paid even if production of business output is interrupted of their business while they are unable to work. Workers' compensation insurance replaces all or part of workers' wages lost and accompanying medical expense incurred because of a job-related injury. That was historically 120 years ago, roughly, that was a big struggle of who is responsible for injuries for workers who get injured while working on the job. And there were discussions. In some countries, the government basically stepped in and decided how it was going to be done. So in Germany, of course, because Germany created a system of social insurance in between roughly 1875, after the Franco-Prussian War, basically, because they suddenly had a lot of money and they decided to do a lot of restructuring and a lot of arming themselves. And they created systems of social insurance in the process. So that included provision for injuries on the job, that system created by Chancellor Bismarck. In most countries, workers' compensation is provided by the government, but in the United States, generally, this is a mandatory private insurance system with premium paid by the employer. Life insurance, a standard life insurance policy pays a benefit to the decedent's family or even designated beneficiary or other designated beneficiary, and may specifically provide for income to an insured person's family, burial, funeral, and other final expenses. Life insurance policies allow the option of having the proceeds paid to the beneficiary either in a lump sum cash payment or an annuity. Annuities are also a form of insurance based on a life. They provide a stream of payments as long as a person lives. Annuities are issued by insurance companies and regulated as insurance. Annuities and pensions that pay a benefit for life are insurance against excessive longevity, because basically it's the event that we are scared about in annuities is the situation when you run out of money, but you are unable to work. So in a sense, it's insurance for the situation where you decide that you leave the workforce. So the risk you're taking, that you have a chance of taking the risk, is the risk of leaving the workforce and going to the places or doing things that you always wanted to do in life, but nobody would pay you for them, such as gardening, or I like going to Portugal, so I would go to Portugal anytime I could, but I have a job, so I need to do my job. But maybe I could do my job from Portugal. That would be nice. But anyway, that's my currently for the last 3 years. But it's almost shameful for me to admit that the first time I ever went to Portugal was in 2017, and since then I'm going every time I can. But anyway, that's not going to be on the test, so don't worry. Certain life insurance contracts accumulate cash values, which may be taken by the insured if the policy is surrendered, or which may be borrowed against. The United States has specific regulations about this, because this is kind of an important question in life insurance. Remember, when you pay the premium, it's based on risk, but as we said, the premium should relate to risk. But in life insurance, the risk is a risk of dying. When you're young, you have very low risk of dying. The probability is low. When you're old, when you get to be 100, the probability of dying is pretty high. If you buy a life insurance policy that covers you for your entire life, from now until forever, then it includes the cost of insurance when you're 100 years old, if you get there. And when you're 100 years old, you are very likely to die. I'm sorry that I have to tell you such unpleasant things, but that's the reality of it. And that risk of being very likely to die in the future is included in the cost of policy. So if you buy a policy that pays for dying at any point in life, that kind of policy is called whole life insurance, and it's expensive. If you buy insurance for life against death, or life insurance, but only for 10 years, for example, next 10 years, the premium will be much, way lower unless you're already 100. But typically people buy life insurance just when they had children. So if you're in your 20s and your 30s, which is typically when people have children, and you buy life insurance for 10 or 20 years, you will be relatively young during the existence of this policy, and the policy will be relatively inexpensive. If you buy insurance for your entire life, from age 25 until you die, then that insurance will be expensive, but most of the expense, most of the cost is for the years way in the future, when you're old. That's when it's really expensive. So the premium, however, is the same every year. The premium at the beginning is too high, and the insurance company keeps some of that money for the cost of your future claim when you're old. That money that they keep is really your money, because it will be paid to your estate, to your family when you die. However, that money is kept by the insurance company. It's called a reserve. And the question, a legal question that is very interesting is that if you cancel the policy, who gets that money? After all, the insurance company keeps it for you. Well, the insurance companies, for some strange reason, thought for a long time that they can just take it. So in the US, about the early 20th century, there was a debate, and there was a regulator in the state of Massachusetts, whose name was Eliza Wright, who insisted that some of that money should be returned to the customer because it's customer's money. And the law now reflects what he was saying. There are regulations about it. You don't have to know them, but it's a good thing to know about the existence of such a situation. In many countries, such as US, UK, France, the tax law provides that the interest paid within a life insurance policy is not taxable under certain circumstances. And that means that people use life insurance as a tax-efficient method of saving, as well as protection in the event of early death. So you see, I mentioned to you that one of the reasons why people use financial products of various types is to have tax benefits. It's not just because of pure finance, pure insurance against bankruptcy or death or so. No, you end up paying less taxes by having insurance than by not having insurance. And therefore, a market for insurance companies is created. Property insurance. So property insurance provides protection against risks to property such as fire, theft, or weather damage. This includes specialized form of insurance such as fire insurance, flood insurance, earthquake insurance, home insurance, inland marine insurance, insurance of property in transit everywhere except on the high seas, or boiler insurance. So automobile insurance, known in the United Kingdom as motor insurance, because, you know, as Oscar Wilde said, the United States and the United Kingdom are very much alike, except for the language. So it's the most common form of insurance worldwide. And in fact, as a country becomes richer, if a country develops economically, one of the first things that people want to get for themselves is a car. It's a bit like American teenagers. When they turn 16 in the United States, they can get a driver's license at the age of 16. And then the next question that comes out of the mouth of a 16-year-old in the United States is, Dad or Father, where is my car? I want a car. Well, it's expensive because teenagers are dangerous drivers, but nevertheless, this creates demand for car insurance. Everybody wants to have a car, although it's admittedly there are people who are probably a bit more reasonable about this and they use a lot of public transportation. But undoubtedly, you can see this in every country that as people become richer, have some money, the desire to have a car is very, very widespread. And the result is that this is the most common form of insurance. Because even in poor countries, the first thing that people want to buy is a car. And then the second thing is they want their own home of some type, and that also there's insurance for that. In the United States, auto insurance policy is required to legally operate a motor vehicle on public roads, although insurance that is required in the United States is only the insurance that covers your responsibility towards others. You don't have to insure your own car against damages. You have to insure against damages that you do to others. In some jurisdictions, bodily injury compensation for automobile accident victims has been changed to a no-fault system, which reduces or eliminates the ability to sue for compensation, but provides automatic eligibility for benefits. So this is a very important question in the United States because we have a massive legal system. Everybody sues everybody and everybody is scared of the lawyers. The lawsuits are expensive, and it's possible to win large rewards if you win a case. But I'm sorry, I do not understand French, so what does this mean?
I think you made an error and set it to the wrong.
Okay,
no.
okay.
Don't
Okay.
worry, don't worry.
Okay, I'm sorry
think-
about that. Okay, I just want to answer your questions, but all right. So my apologies that I don't speak French, but I grew up in Poland, and it was mandatory because Poland was then controlled by the Soviet Union. It was mandatory for me to learn Russian, and I learned some German in high school, and I never took any classes for English, but my mother insisted that she hired a graduate student in English literature to just have conversation in English with me all the time, and that's how I learned English. My German is very poor, my apologies, but I understand the grammar of German language better than I understand the grammar of English language. And the grammar of Russian language is similar to Polish language. However, the Russian language is rather dramatically different from Polish language because it uses a completely different alphabet. And also, Polish language is very, very flat, and even flatter than the Japanese. Japanese language has the same property as Polish language, that you put the accent at the same syllable every time. In Japanese, it's the first syllable. In Polish, it's the third syllable. I'm sorry, the second syllable from the last. My apologies, second syllable from the last. So it's the sound of words is very, very similar all the time. And so it's not a nice sounding language, but the Russian is very melodic. So unless they are shouting some commands at you and they're mad at you, it's a very nice sounding language. Of course, I think Portuguese is the most beautiful language in the world, but I admit that a lot of people think that French is the most beautiful language in the world, and I apologize, I have not learned French. So the problem with excessive lawsuits created a situation where insurance pays for the damages no matter who's at fault. For cars that are rented, when you travel and then rent a car somewhere, credit card companies provide insurance for rented cars. However, it doesn't work this way that they pay the damage immediately. You have to pay for it yourself, and then the credit card company reimburses you. And the car rental companies also provide their own insurance, which is very expensive in relation to the costs. However, it's very convenient because once you have the car rental insurance, you don't have to pay anything. If you completely destroy the car, they will just come, get the car, get you a new one, and it's paid by that insurance. In general, the more expensive insurance, the more likely is that they will treat you well. But that's kind of part of life. You pay for the first class on an airplane for the same flight, but they will treat you better. So aviation insurance, which is about flights, insures hull, the body of aircraft, spares, parts not attached to the body of aircraft, deductible, a separate policy that covers the deductible of the main policy, hull wear, and liability risks. Again, remember, deductible is that portion of the claim that is paid by the person insured. And there are policies to cover that when the deductible may turn out to be very large. The entire aviation industry probably wouldn't exist in the form that we have it now if it wasn't for the insurance industry. As I already told you, the main reason, in my opinion, why so many people live in Florida is the existence of insurance industry that covers the damage to the buildings in Florida. And we have this massive flying all over the world partly because all of the flights are in some way insured. Even if you don't buy your own personal insurance for yourself when you fly, the airline company has various forms of insurance. The production of airplanes has various forms of insurance. Boiler insurance, also known as boiler and machinery insurance, or equipment breakdown insurance, insurance against accidental physical damage to equipment or machinery. Builder's risk insurance insures against the risk of physical loss or damage to property during construction. Builder's risk insurance is typically written on all risk bases covering damage due to any cause, including the negligence of the insured, not otherwise expressly excluded. So what do you do with the negligence of the insured? Well, you will have to, unfortunately, study it, see who is riskier, who is less risky, and simply charge people higher premium if they're not doing a good job managing the risk. Crop insurance protects against crop loss or damage caused by weather, hail, drought, from frost damage, insects, or disease, to things that we grow, and that's food, or things that some of the crops are used as inputs for other production. So in the United States, for example, crop insurance is very widely used and is rather heavily subsidized by the government. We live in a very global economy, but in this global economy, some countries really want to have certain types of production in their own country of the things that are important to them. So the United States subsidizes crop insurance for the purpose of having agricultural production in the United States. Now, of course, to the people who benefit from this, great benefit to them, and there is continuous very big increase in output of agricultural production in the United States. Very, very large agricultural production. The downside is that because we have a global economy, we could be growing it somewhere else at lower cost and just shipping things worldwide. Why not? Well, there are political reasons why for not wanting it this way. There are reasons of wanting to do things in your own country. But the one thing that is discouraging in this is that agricultural production is relatively simple in the early stages, doesn't require that much capital. So countries that are poor, if they could grow food and export, that would be one of the ways out of poverty. But if countries that are already wealthy give heavy subsidies to their agricultural productions, they're basically creating this uneven playing field where those countries that would try to grow wealthy by through agriculture would have a hard time. Earthquake insurance is a form of property insurance that pays the policyholder in the event of an earthquake that causes damage to a property. So this again depends on the country, how much, whether earthquake is included in the coverage that you have. There are certain parts of the world where the risk of earthquakes is considered to be very small. I live in the part of the world like that. I have an earthquake insurance addition, which is called a rider, to my home insurance policy. I bought earthquake insurance. However, my policy says that I will have to pay 10% of that damage to my home from earthquake. And otherwise, it's very, very inexpensive. I believe I pay somewhere in the range of $80 a year. So that's why I have it. It seemed reasonably inexpensive. Can an earthquake happen where I live? Almost impossible, although there's a theory about certain part of the middle of the United States that there may be a very large earthquake here at some point. But the standard earthquake insurance in the US does not cover earthquake damage. So you have to buy an addition to your regular policy, and most earthquake insurance policies feature a high deductible. A fidelity bond is a form of casualty insurance that covers policyholders for losses that they incur as a result of fraudulent acts by specified individuals. So that's a situation where you may have an employee that does some damage through fraudulent actions to your business, and you buy insurance against your employees doing things like that. I had a good friend who started a business of renting music CDs in the 1990s in Louisville, Kentucky. And the business was doing reasonably well because that was before iPods. And then one day they discovered that the person they put in charge of calculating the amount of sales tax and sending that money to the tax authority of Louisville and of the state of Kentucky simply took that money and disappeared. That's exactly what we mean. So the company was set up the process and was doing everything to pay its taxes, except that the person who was put in charge of sending those taxes to the tax authorities didn't send the money, instead stole the money. The tax authorities will still want that money. There is no question about it. And then what do? And when you even catch the person, they may have already spent the money. Well, your rational choice for a situation like this is to purchase this type of insurance. Yes, it's an expense, but when you're dealing with the situation when you're supposed to pay taxes, don't expect the government to say, oh, that was very sad what happened to you. You are forgiven. That's just not going to happen because taxes are legally due to the tax authority. Flood insurance protects against property loss due to flooding. So one thing that is very important to remember about flood insurance is that flood damage is very, very extensive. You may think it's no big deal that some water got into your house. That depends on the structure of construction of your house. But for most homes in the United States, having large amount of water means you have to replace all walls in the part of the building where that happened. It's very, very extensive and expensive repair. And it can happen to all homes in a given area. So because of that, in the United States, the government created the National Flood Insurance Program. It's paid by the government and it's subsidized by the government. There is a premium for it. There is a premium. You have to pay the premium. And you are required to have it if you live in an area deemed by the federal government through its Army engineers to be a flood risk area, and you borrow the money to buy the home. Banks require it. So the situation is that the cost of this insurance seems very high to most people. It's typically as much as your regular policy, and the government still loses money on it. It's an expensive coverage because anytime flood happens, the cost of repairs is much, much higher than we envision. Home insurance, also commonly called hazard insurance or homeowners insurance, is the, somebody asked the question, is the risk assessment reconsidered throughout the lifetime of the insurance, despite the payment being the same, or only when accident happens? So the question seems a bit contradictory. you said despite the payment being the same. And the reason why I feel this is contradictory is that there are two types of contracts. I'm sorry, I should have explained. I'm reading a question from the chat, and it's a very good question, but slightly confusing. So there are two types of insurance. Those where the contract is long-term and the premium is fixed for a long term. And that's life insurance, life annuity, pension contracts of some types, and private health insurance in Germany. Otherwise, insurance contracts are short-term and you renew them every year or every half a year, but every year is most common. When you renew the policy, the premium changes, and the premium changes based on the risk. So the answer to your question, the first part of the question is the risk assessment reconsidered throughout the lifetime of the insurance contract, I presume? The answer is always yes. That's part of the job of the actuary, to always assess the risk. And if the risk is higher than we originally expected when the policy was issued, even if it's a long-term policy, even if the premium is fixed, the actuary may have to raise the reserves, the amount of money set aside to pay the claims. Maybe you mean this. Can the pricing, okay, now you say it's clear. Can the pricing change only when you have an accident or for some other reason? And the answer is, for a short-term contract, the pricing will change based on accident or anything else that indicates that your risk changed. For car insurance, by the way, if you are caught driving drunk, your premium will go up a lot. And even if you don't have an accident. So I'm sorry if I talk too much, but generally the question was, do you have to consider risk all the time, or do you ignore it until an accident happens? A good actuary considers risk all the time. But that means that you collect the data on your customers all the time. And the answer is yes, you collect the data on your customers all the time. So do your insurance companies collect the data on you? And the answer is, oh, yes, they do, fortunately or unfortunately. Another very good question, could we say that the volatility of the risk implies shorter contracts? The answer is, generally, that's what insurance companies want, so that they can change the premium. But the law may prevent them from doing so. So it's kind of a game between insurance company, which always wants to adjust the premium when the risk changes. Either way, by the way, if you are clearly a lower risk, they very often would like to lower your premium, because if they don't, this is a voluntary contract, you can leave and go somewhere else because someone else will give you a lower premium. The government very often doesn't want you to change the premium, and the customer always wants the lowest premium possible. So it's a bit of a game. And by the way, it's very dangerous when you have very high premiums and your customers can get lower premiums elsewhere if they're low-risk customers, because that means that the low-risk customers will be leaving. You only stuck with high-risk customers, and your costs will turn out to be much higher than originally expected. So this is called adverse selection. And it's undesirable, but it's part of life. For home insurance, claims due to earthquake, floods, act of God, or war are excluded. So things that are, from the perspective of insurance, very, very unusual. Separate insurance can be purchased for flood and earthquakes. And the home insurance policy is typically a term contract, a contract that is in effect for a fixed period of time, typically 1 year. In the US, most home buyers borrow money in the form of a mortgage loan, and the mortgage lender always requires that the buyer purchase, purchase is probably better this way, homeowners insurance is a condition of the loan in order to protect the bank. Whereas marine insurance and marine cargo insurance covers the loss of or damage of ships at sea or on inland waterways and of the cargo that may be on them. So there are kind of standard contracts, and then there are unusual contracts, but the most important market for shipping on high seas is provided by Lloyd's of London. This is their specialty because their company was created for covering ships, English ships around the world in the period of building the British Empire. In my humble opinion, in the 1600s, when in the late 1600s, the British created commercial insurance, that was, well, England and English at that time. But anyway, England was building an empire. England was in a very big confrontation with Spain at that time. In the 1600s, Spain went bankrupt 4 times. And one of the reasons was this confrontation with England. They had big military expenses, but the financial system in Spain was basically this way, that the king was the main controller of all the finances, while the English created markets intentionally, partly because the English crown couldn't afford to do things that the Spanish crown could. But that created a lot of activities in assessing risk that the Spanish didn't do. And one more thing that was at that time very powerful was that the English ships bringing the riches from their colonies and places they were conquering were mostly insured. The Spanish ships were very often robbed by the English pirates or sunk by the English pirates. And Spain was borrowing a lot of money from Italian banks to finance its operations because, again, the finance was concentrated with the Spanish king. And when the English calculated that if they sink the ships with the gold from the New World, then the Spanish would not be able to pay back the loans to the Italian banks. So before 1600s, the Italian banks were the biggest banks in Europe. And after 1600s, no longer. And Spain was very rich as a result of acquiring the colonies. After 1600s, no longer. The English strategy of robbing others and insuring themselves was very effective. Now now that we speak about the English robbing the Spanish galleons, terrorism insurance, because this was not an act of English government, they had private pirates attacking the ships. So it was by modern definition terrorism. Terrorism insurance provides protection against any loss or damage caused by terrorist activities. It is almost always provided by government or with government support because traditional insurance considered those acts of war, and war is not insured. Liability insurance covers legal claims against the insured. Many types of insurance include some form of liability coverage. For example, a homeowner's insurance policy will normally include liability coverage, which protects the insured in the event of a claim brought by someone who slips and falls on the property or somehow has an accident of some type. The protection offered by a liability insurance policy is twofold: a legal defense in the event of a lawsuit against the policyholder, and indemnification, and that's a fancy word for a payment on behalf of the insured with respect to a settlement or court verdict. So indemnification means a payment to cover the loss. So liability policies typically cover only the negligence of the insured and will not apply to results of willful or intentional acts by the insured. So you can't just, beat up a person that comes to your house and expect insurance to pay the medical bill. That's not right. Okay. Now, very large part of the financial system and business of finance in the world is pensions. However, in most countries, systems of pensions are run by governments. And a lot of developed economies, and you might say Western economies, but it's not just Western unless you consider Japan Western. All of the developed economies have this problem that the cost of pensions turned out to be much higher than they had expected. Well, but to understand why the cost of pensions have become higher, all you need to do is just see three things. The first one is that people live longer, much longer than expected. In the United Kingdom, there's an Office of Government Actuary, and one of the jobs of the government actuary in the United Kingdom is to provide an estimate of how long the people in the United Kingdom will live. And it's a hard job, undoubtedly, but everybody does this kind of estimates regularly. It's all insurance companies life insurance companies are estimating mortality of their customers all the time. The interesting thing is that the Office of Government Actuary in the United Kingdom has been wrong in its predictions. I don't say that they're incompetent. They just erred. They had errors. Well, everybody makes errors. But it turns out that their errors were always in one direction. They always underestimated how much longer people will live. In other words, people live longer than the experts predicted. And I would comment on this, that a pension is a system of paying people for living longer. And by paying them pensions, you provide them with money to take better care of themselves so they can live longer. In other words, people living longer in those wealthy developed economies is a result of, first of all, living in a wealthy developed economy, but it's also a result of providing pensions so that they can take better care of themselves. And all of those governments that provide the pensions also created a system of health insurance or health care for its citizens. And therefore, they also work towards increasing longevity. For the Government Actuary Office of the United Kingdom, one thing that turned out to be relevant was smoking. It turns out that people who fought in World War II, who were English or American, both English and American soldiers, typically started smoking when they were serving in the military. While the generations born after World War II smoked significantly less, and smoking became less and less a standard behavior in, all of Western Europe and the United States and Canada. And it's very likely that this contributed to increased longevity. Of course, smoking in the military was not directly encouraged, but the military very often provided free cigarettes. And people reach out for cigarettes very often when they're in a stressful situation. Now, of course, you can use other addictive substances, such as used by other countries, such as alcohol or methamphetamines, or whatever that's pronounced, a meth, commonly called. That was used by the German military in World War II. And that has its own effects. But in the studied population in US and United Kingdom, it seems that a significant contributing factor to increased longevity has been the fact that people just smoke dramatically less after World War II. People born after World War II, overwhelming majority of them do not smoke. No, they do other things. They don't do bad. They do bad things to themselves. So. Over time, Americans, of course, consume much more of the illegal drugs, and they also smoke more over time. I'm sorry, drink more. They smoke less, but they drink more over time. Now, of course, drinking, that's a much more complicated question, because heavy drinking is bad for you, but light drinking is probably beneficial. So it's a complicated question. And of course, I can refer you to some actuaries who study this, because there's a research division at a reinsurance company of America, which is headquartered near St. Louis in Missouri, where several of my former students work in the research division, estimating the improvements in longevity. So one of those students, one of my first students ever, is now one of, I think, the director in that division, and he said that the effect of sitting too much is underestimated, and we may pay a big price in terms of longevity for that. Some pensions are a very large part of the modern life. Pensions are typically payments made in the form of a guaranteed annuity to a retired disabled employee. And the annuity typically means a series of payments at prescribed points in time, typically monthly or annual. The word annuity refers to a Latin word for year, annum. So annual payments were the norm when this kind of things were created. But now it's more common that the payments are monthly. Some retirement plans, called superannuations, designs accumulate the cash balance that a retiree can draw upon at retirement, rather than promising annuity payments. These are often also called pensions. In either case, a pension created by an employer for the benefit of an employee is commonly referred to as an occupational or employer pension. Labor unions, the government, or other organizations may also fund pensions. Occupational pensions are a form of deferred compensation, usually advantageous to employee and employer for tax reasons. So governments encourage private pension provision by not taxing the money that goes into the pension system and is in the pension system until the payments are made to the retired persons. And when those payments are made, they're typically treated as taxable income, like income from work. Many pensions also contain an insurance aspect, since they often will pay benefits to survivors or disabled beneficiaries, while annuity income insures against the risk of longevity. And it's also important to remember that governments very often encourage payments to the surviving spouse of a person who received a pension. So if a worker worked in some company, say for 40 years, then retires, receives a pension, and dies, if a spouse of that worker is still alive, in the US, the law requires that at least 50% of the original benefit is paid to the surviving spouse. Beginning with the late 19th century, European and then North American governments created social, I'm not sure why I say them, but North American governments created social insurance pensions, mostly run on a pay-as-you-go basis. The very first such system was created by Chancellor Bismarck in Germany after the Franco-Prussian War, and before Bismarck was kicked out of his job as the Chancellor of Germany. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was somewhere 1890 or so. The Franco-Prussian Wars ended in 1871. France had to pay just incredible, immense amounts of money to to Germany, and France was required to pay it over something like 4 or 5 years. And until France paid it, German military would occupy France. That was the treaty that was signed after the war. So the French people collected the money to pay it quickly, to pay it as soon as possible in less than 3 years, because they wanted the German soldiers to leave. And they did. And Germany got rich as a result of taking this money from France. Now, you, of course, probably heard about the German complaint that they had to pay the reparations under the Versailles Treaty after World War I. But you probably never heard that those reparations were basically a copy of what Prussia, or Germany, eventually required France to pay after the Franco-Prussian War. It was basically tit for tat. It was exactly the same type of payments from Germany that France had to pay them. And of course, France paid the payments and paid them early, and Germany did not pay the money they were supposed to pay under the Versailles Treaty. So anyway, the Germans created this system first, Chancellor Bismarck, and then many countries created it too, which are systems of social insurance pensions. In 1980, a system like that in Chile was replaced by the new Chile pension system, which is private accounts where people save money to accumulate pensions. The pensions under this new pension system are significantly higher than they were under the previous system, but people also complain that they may be inadequate. And there's always debate about what the ideal pension system is. So in Chile, a state-run pay-as-you-go defined benefit scheme was replaced by defined contribution pension system managed entirely by private pension funds under supervision by a specialized government supervision authority. So similar reform was undertaken by Argentina in 1994 and reversed subsequently due to a deep economic crisis in 2000s. Actually, in 2001, basically, it was dismantled in a very peculiar way because it was forced to invest in government bonds. A partial reform of similar nature was undertaken in Sweden and Poland, and in Poland eventually reversed in a pretty horrible way by not the current, but the previous government of Poland, where the government told the people, oh, well, the money that you have in those savings accounts, it's not really yours, we're taking it. So that's one of the reasons why that government lost the election. Now, I mentioned in this the social insurance. And social insurance is a form of insurance for which the system is administered by the government. Benefits are defined by law. And in American English, the description of something that is prescribed by law is the word statutory. So the benefits are statutory. Premiums are paid in the form of taxes, typically payroll taxes. And system is typically run on a pay-as-you-go basis, meaning that all the money collected is immediately used to pay the benefits. As opposed to the insurance, private insurance, where as the money comes in, the actuary calculates how much of it has to be kept for future claims and how much can be spent on current expenses. In those government systems, they are designed to be this way that all the money that is collected is immediately paid out. Now, it's a different system, so it's to fully understand the relationship of the two, you really should express the private system in the language of the social insurance system or social insurance system in the language of a private system. If you compare them just as they are designed, they are different entities. And of course, you don't have to worry about this for the test. I just want you to know that this kind of systems exist. So United States has two major systems of social insurance: old age survivors and disability income. But most commonly, this is called Social Security. And that's a system of retirement benefits for people who are 62 years or older. However, the normal retirement age is 67. You get a full benefit at age of 67. You get a significantly reduced benefit if you choose to retire early at age 62. And generally speaking, when you turn 72, you have to start collecting the benefits if you have them. Although, how should I put this? I don't think they make you do this. It's just that they increase the benefits if you delay your retirement. But after age, I believe 72, that was recently changed from 70, they stop increasing the benefits. And the other system is called Medicare. Medicare is a social insurance system of health insurance, but only for the people in two categories. One is people who are 65 and older and have worked in the system in the United States for at least 10 years, roughly. And the other one is that people who are eligible for disability insurance, this disability income portion of Social Security, who become totally and permanently disabled and have worked for at least 2 years. So this is mostly really catastrophic situation where somebody typically very young has a horrible type of accident and is unable to do any work whatsoever and has worked at least 2 years, then the person becomes eligible for Medicare. As I said, Social Security is mostly a defined benefit pension system, mostly provides retirement insurance, but also provides disability insurance for total and permanent disability. The one thing that you also need to be aware of is that insurance is a business that is very substantially regulated by governments. In the European Union, there is a supranational level of regulation through European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority. And there is a uniform system of regulation because of the Solvency II law that was supposed to go into effect in 2008, but went into effect in 2016. Nevertheless, there is a unified system of regulation of insurance in the European Union, and that's a pretty substantial success of the system. The interesting thing is that the European law about the regulation of insurance companies, the Solvency II law, has become in many ways a model for insurance regulation in many other countries. So for example, I have a student, former student who works in Mexico, and Mexican system of insurance regulation is to a great degree modeled on European Union system. And my student was active in implementing response to the new regulation at his company in Mexico. And he was, the student was German, and in fact, he was working for a German company doing business in Mexico. And he was struck that the regulation imposed by Mexico was very much a regulation he already knew from Germany. So that was a good thing for his work. And I also have students, somewhere around 5 or 6 students who work, former students who work in Thailand. And they also commented that it's uncanny how much the regulation system in Thailand resembles Solvency II regulation. In the United States, uniquely, insurance is primarily regulated at the state level, but there is a new federal regulator called Federal Insurance Office, effective 2010. The Federal McCarran-Ferguson Act, passed in 1945, established that federal acts that do not expressly purport to regulate the business of insurance do not preempt state laws and regulations that regulate the business of insurance. It was a very strange law because it basically said that, yes, the federal government is in charge of regulating insurance because it's interstate commerce, but we will give it a break and basically delegate some of the regulation of insurance, most of the regulation of insurance, to the states. Each state operates independently to regulate its own insurance markets, typically through a state department of insurance. Model acts and regulations promulgated by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners provide some degree of uniformity between states. So this organization, National Association of Insurance Commissioners, or NAIC, is an organization of regulators from various states in the United States, all states, from all of them, that coordinate regulation of insurance in various states. This unusual structure of regulation created special problems during the 2008 credit crisis, when problems of AIG insurance resulted in an intervention by federal regulators, mainly the Federal Reserve Bank. So AIG was so big that there was no state insurance regulator that would be capable of providing the financial resources to handle the disaster. Because they had to immediately make payments of somewhere in the range of $87 billion. That's a lot of money. There wasn't a single person in the world that had that kind of money at the time. And there is really no company that could provide that. And Federal Reserve basically created that money out of nothing to temporarily fix payments that AIG had to make to other market participants. Eventually, that money was repaid with interest, and the company was completely restructured. So I want to tell you now a little bit more about life insurance. The structure that we'll follow is that I will tell you some things about life insurance and some things about property casualty insurance. Then we'll do the mathematics of life insurance, including how the premium is calculated and how reserves are calculated. Then we'll do the mathematics of non-life insurance or general insurance or property casualty insurance and how the reserves are calculated. Then we will discuss the question of what is the true proper value of insurance reserves and insurance liabilities from the financial theory perspective. And we'll discuss some of the regulation as well. And we'll discuss one particular issue in regulation, and that's the requirement of how much capital a company must have. That's a very important part of the regulation. And the main concept, by the way, used in regulation of insurance companies in Solvency II insurance law in the European Union is value at risk. So we will have classes on value at risk, and we'll have classes on arbitrage-free models for pricing financial instruments, because that's really the guideline for the proper fair value of insurance liabilities, which is also a requirement of Solvency II in the European Union. So now we'll talk a little bit about pensions and other aspects of regulation, and why pensions are such a big challenge right now. Let's start by talking a little bit more about life insurance. Life insurance is a contract between the policy owner and the insurer, where the insurer agrees to pay a sum of money upon the occurrence of the insured individuals or individuals. Actually, this is very strange the way I phrase it. Let's make it just insured individual's death or other events such as terminal illness or critical illness. In return, the policy owner or policy payer agrees to pay a stipulated amount called the premium at regular intervals or lump sums. Lump sum, really. There may be designs in some countries where bills and death expenses plus catering for after funeral expenses should be included in policy premium, because in some countries, one of the purposes of insurance is the expenses of the funeral. In fact, there is specific funeral insurance that is very often sold in less developed countries, because a funeral is a major expense. And of course, this is also depends on the culture, because in some countries it is considered proper to have a very expensive and kind of a big event funeral. So that makes it more expensive. In the United States, the predominant form simply specified a lump sum to be paid on the insured's demise. So specific amount is to be paid. Life insurance may be divided into two basic classes, temporary and permanent, or the following subclasses. Term life insurance, universal life, whole life, variable universal, and endowment life insurance. Temporary or term life insurance. So this is now the most sold product in the United States. Term life insurance provides for a specified term of years, for a coverage for a specified term of certain number of years, I probably should have said, for a specified premiums. The policy does not accumulate, have any cash value. So if you cancel the policy, you get no money. Term is generally considered pure insurance, where the premium buys protection in the event of death and nothing else. It is also the cheapest type of life insurance, and it's very appropriate for people whose sole purpose of buying life insurance is to have a large amount of money paid to their family or their survivors of some type upon their death. So it's very appropriate for people who are relatively young, such like in their 20s, and have a family and have children. Because for a relatively small amount, they can purchase very large amount of coverage. And while the children are small, so at least 10 years, preferably 20 years, there is this large amount of money that will be paid if a parent dies. And now, of course, it's a tragic event for the family if a parent dies, but if there's at least a large amount of money that will be paid upon that death, that provides protection to the family. Now, permanent life insurance is life insurance that remains in force until the policy matures, unless the owner fails to pay the premium when due. Yeah, those additional explanations are not necessary. The policy cannot be canceled by the insurer for any reason except fraud in the application, and that cancellation may occur within a period of time defined by law, usually 2 years. As I understand the law in France, actually in France, the insurance company cannot cancel life insurance even with fraud in the application anytime, although I don't know the law, and it's not going to be on the test. So I'm sorry, I don't know all the laws in France very well. I apologize for that. I know them better in the United States because I live in the United States. Permanent insurance builds cash value that reduces the amount at risk to the insurance company and thus the insurance expense over time. So from the point of view of risk management of an insurance company, having a larger premium and having certain amount of money, the reserve that will be used to pay the death benefit, makes it easier from the risk perspective. But term life insurance is basically like a gamble. Either you die or you don't. And if you die, the insurance company has to pay a lot of money, which is much, much larger than the premium collected. The premium for, it's not unusual that the premium for whole life insurance could be 5 to 10 times, that's kind of normal, even up to 100 times more than for term insurance, especially if term insurance has fixed premium for an extended period of time. The three basic types of permanent insurance are whole life, universal life, and endowment. Now, endowment doesn't exist basically in the US, but there was a time when it was the main type of insurance purchased in Germany for a certain period of time because of taxes, of course. When people do strange things with their money, the reason is usually taxes. And now, at this point, we are out of time for today, so I want to thank you very much. I hope I answered all your questions that you had. I seem to, but you can always email me. And good luck with everything, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.